Ayo. One who sees all beings in their own self, and their own self in all beings, loses all fear. This is a quote from the Upanishads I came across recently, and I wanted to make a little video around it. So let's start with the fear. Real quick, when we feel fear, it is because we think we are going to get hurt or suffer or become diminished in some way, right? Think about any time you've been afraid. You're afraid to go on a roller coaster because it could come off the rail and you could crash and die. You're afraid to speak in front of a public group of people because your reputation could be thrown out the window and people could hate you and kick you out of the community you're in. You're afraid to go after your goals because then you might fail and then you'll think yourself as a loser and you'll be worse than you are now. Whatever the fear comes from, it comes from you think you're going to get hurt, you think you're going to die, get diminished, whatever it is. This fear comes up because you think it's going to hurt you. But if you can see yourself as everyone and everything, like the last video I made on cosmic consciousness, if you transfer your perspective into God's consciousness, if you can see this whole place as God's play, and you are part of that play, and there's no difference between you and anyone else or anything else in this universe, it's all the same consciousness. What is there to fear? You are everything. You are everyone and everywhere and every time. You just think you're separate because of conditioning, because of our culture, because of the way you were raised. And you have this spiritual awakening that you see, you experience directly. If you've had a spiritual awakening, you've experienced this directly. You are everyone, everywhere, at all times. You are just playing your role as this person. But in reality, if you were born in another person's shoes, you would live exactly how they live because you would go through those experiences with that genetics and that time. And there's no difference between the core of who you are. Your consciousness at its root is the same as everyone and everything. The way I like to explain consciousness as in everything, whether it's material or whether it's alive or dead, whether it's material or living, whatever it is. If you think of this block right here, there's a certain consciousness inside the block that holds the chemical compound together, to hold these molecules together, to keep these atoms moving in a certain way to create its brickness, its blockness. Whatever makes it a block is held together by the consciousness of this reality that keeps it in its shape, in its form. And it's 99% air, actually. It is basically empty space. So that's going down the quantum physics rabbit hole, which we don't have to go down. But just to make the point, there is a consciousness in that block that gives it its blockness, right? And makes it a block. And then in the living sense, Whether it's alive or dead, there's a tree that gives us its treeness, and there's this life force that moves through it that makes it grow and makes bark, and it makes leaves and flowers and whatever else is associated with that tree. There's a certain consciousness that moves it into a certain way to make it a certain thing. And even your own body. I always think about my fingernails. Like, what? There's no conscious thought of making this skin cell different than this fingernail cell. And yet, there is this whole God's play, this consciousness is moving and developing and deciding, okay, this is going to be the last skin cell, and then we're going to start creating this nail cell. And it just works perfectly. And of course, sometimes there's hiccups, whatever. It doesn't work perfectly all the time. But 99.999% of the time, it works perfectly for people. If you get a cut, you will heal. If you, whatever the case may be, your body knows how to be a body, knows how to body. It has nothing to do with your conscious awareness. Of course, you can influence the way your body moves and adapts simply by using your consciousness. That is one of the gifts of being human. But ultimately, your heart is beating on its own. It has nothing to do with your decision to make it beat. In the same way, this block is being a block, and it has no decision to be a block, but the consciousness that holds it together, that holds those molecules to move in a certain way, gives it its blockness. So there's no separation really from anybody, anything. You just have to experience it. Whether you have directly experienced it yet might be a question of research. You might have to go down some experimental rabbit holes and find that answer for yourself, because I can tell you where I'm pointing at, and it might help you, it might give you a perspective, and it might inspire you to move and think a certain way. But really, it doesn't mean anything unless you experience it yourself directly. You have to have your own direct experience of this, and there's many different ways and many pathways all throughout the world that have developed over the ages. And so, seeing yourself in all beings and all beings in yourself, you have to redefine what yourself is. The self is different than your small personal self. Carl Jung, he calls it the capital S self. This self is bigger than you. It's bigger than this world. It makes this world move. It is the life force that moves everything. And when you identify with that, now you have so much more power. Think about just the difference of what the universe is capable of doing. Think of what the universe is capable of creating, moving, the synchronicities and the magic behind the scenes that moves every little atom in this whole world. Think about the power of the universe and what it can do in this reality, this realm. And then think of your personal self, your lower S self. How much effect could you have as one individual person? Probably not that much. to be honest. One person, maybe they can, I'm thinking of the good and the bad. From the goodness of its expression, you can think of something like a Jesus Christ or a Buddha, any of these sages that inspire hundreds and billions of people. Or on the other end, you can become a Genghis Khan, a Hitler. You can destroy millions of people, but really, how much effect did you have on the world, on the universe? And maybe you affected some people in a short 50-year period, 100-year period. Some people were affected by you, but in the billions of years this planet has been around, how much effect does one person have versus the effect of the whole universe? Think of the power that spins the stars. And that's available to you right now. And if it was, and you could feel that and know that, what fear would you have? How could you fear anything? What would you fear? You're everything. You're it. All right. Love you. Ciao.